So Rachel's answer to that question, whether this conception of God, one who is a proper object of worship, is compatible with being a moral agent, with being a moral person. And his answer to that, of course, is no. It's the whole point of writing this article. On page 272, down here at the bottom of the second column, he says, in fact, there is a long tradition in moral philosophy, from Plato to Kant, according to which such a recognition, that is, the recognition of a being who deserved our absolute allegiance and obedience, could never be made by a moral agent, that is, by somebody who was truly a moral person. According to this tradition, to be a moral agent is to be an autonomous or self-directed agent. Remember, to be autonomous literally means to give the law to yourself. Unlike the precepts of law or social custom, moral precepts are imposed by the agent upon himself. This is a very important idea you'll remember in Kant. And the penalty for their violation is, in Kant's words, self-contempt and inner abhorrence. The virtuous man is therefore identified with the man of integrity, that is, the man who acts according to precepts which he can, on reflection, conscientiously approve in his own heart. That is, unless you are deciding upon what's right and wrong for yourself, ultimately, that you cannot be said to be a moral person. If you're entirely putting yourself in somebody else's hands in terms of determining for you what is right or wrong or what you should or shouldn't do, that would mean that you were no longer a moral person. You were no longer a moral agent. I'm here on page 373 where Rachel says, on this view, to deliver oneself over to a moral authority for directions about what to do is simply incompatible with being a moral agent. To say, I will follow so-and-so's directions no matter what they are, and no matter what my own conscience would otherwise direct me to do, is to opt out of moral thinking altogether. It is to abandon one's role as a moral agent. This is an interesting question. And look at what he goes on to say. He says it does not matter whether the so-and-so is the law, the customs of one society, or God. Well, it matters a heck of a lot, actually, I think. But think of somebody who just says, my country, right or wrong, or I just do what my parents tell me to do. Those people are, well, what are they? Immature, not taking responsibility for themselves, not really grown up, brainwashed. Patriotism, I think, is a good thing, but to say my country right or wrong, or I just, always, that's just no. Sometimes your country could do bad things and you have to recognize that. When we're kids, we pretty much do what our parents say, and that's fine because we're kids. But if you're an adult and you just simply sort of unthinkingly or just with absolute obedience do or believe to be right what your parents say is right, well, I mean, hopefully they know what they're talking about, right? But still, that means you're not a fully grown adult. You're not an autonomous moral agent. You're not really directing yourself and doing what you think is right. So I guess really the idea is, unless you have that autonomy, are you really even a moral creature? Really, children aren't really moral creatures, right? They don't have the capacities yet to be moral creatures. And some people never do, right? And they just sort of do what they're told or do what authority tells them to do. And Rachel's is saying, well, I guess implying that those people are not full moral creatures. Now, to put oneself in the hands of God is usually thought to be different, I mean, to put oneself entirely in the hands of another human being is foolish unless you're a child. But we do think that absolute allegiance to or absolutely trusting in God or, despite what our consciences may say, is of a different order. But Rachel's is denying that. I suppose you'd have to think, what are the differences? He doesn't see any really important differences, although he'll look at objections in the next section. But that's the basic idea, is that The position of worship of an almighty God who deserves our absolute allegiance undercuts the autonomy necessary in order to be a true moral agent.